Good day. My name is Brad Steele, and I'm the Senior Director of Unified Communications for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the 2021 NASTD Immediate Past President. NASTD is the National Association of State Technology Directors, and it is made up of technology professionals serving state government. It is a member-driven organization whose purpose is to advance and promote the effective use of information technology and services to improve the operation of state government. In our Constitution, under Purposes and Goals, the second goal listed is to engage in programs for the training, education, and development of technology professionals from all areas of state government. While president last year, I decided to put together a set of educational videos, sort of 101 sessions, to help with this education. Asking industry leaders 10 standard questions about technology or services that they offer. And if you have not seen the videos we put together last year, I asked you to go back to the NASTD website, nastd.org, and you can rewatch those videos on SD-WAN, Kubernetes, and hyperconvergence. Going forward, my goal is to do quarterly sessions on the upcoming technologies. The topic for the first quarter of 2021 is workforce optimization, WFO, and workforce engagement, WEM. For the discussion from our corporate community, I'd like to welcome Andrew Malachek. He's the Director of Sales for the SLED portion of Calabrio. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate you having me today and looking forward to kind of telling people a little bit more about workforce optimization.
Excellent. So for those of you who haven't seen the videos before, I just go through a set of 10 questions. It's not quite 20 questions, but sometimes it gets to be that in the end once I add in. But standard set of questions around technology. And if you'd like more information around the discussion points that we're talking to, you can reach out to me and we can get you in touch with Andrew or one of our other corporate partners. So Andrew, let's start off with the obvious question. What is WFO and WEM, and what are they used for?
Perfect. Thanks, Brad. That's a great starting question, obviously, start at the beginning and what is it that we're going to be talking about today. So workforce optimization, workforce engagement management, customer engagement management, there's about 1 million different names for this product, and it's typically a suite of products. So many folks have had exposure to something of, either workforce management, which is a scheduling and forecasting tool, quality management, which is scoring for agents, analytics, agent engagement. All these are housed in a set of tools that essentially are used in a corporate setting for perhaps like a customer service department or a call center. In a state technology area, though, it would typically be things around citizen engagement, better providing access and services to those citizens, but also a set of tools for the agents to better perform their tasks. So again, really kind of starting at the building blocks, things like call recording and quality management. So the ability, obviously, to record every call that comes in and goes out. From there, you've got, obviously, the ability to score those calls. So were my agents accurately representing, whatever they were speaking about, whether it's a service or a product, and then scoring those agents and being able to go review those scores internally to make sure, again, that we're kind of holding a certain standard level of quality within the organization. Built into that, there's some tools under the name analytics, but analytics is such a broad name. It could mean 1 million different things to 1 million people. But in a workforce optimization or workforce engagement world, what it really means are things like phonetic speech analytics. So basically popping up any certain time the system hears a phrase. Really common examples like "thank you for calling" or any certain tagline. So every time that pops up or doesn't pop up in a call. Transcription analytics, which is what it sounds like, transcribing the speech audio into text format for quicker search. And then there's a host of other tools like agent performance tools, just making sure that people are accessing the correct knowledge bases, they're being efficient in how they're handling citizen issues. And then lastly, I would say it's a very specific practice within workforce engagement management is that workforce management tool. And that's using historical data to predict future call volumes, chat volumes, emails, cases, and then in turn scheduling people against those. So as we like to jokingly call it, making sure you have the right butts in the right seats at the right time to be able to handle your volumes. So that's always just an easy way to think about it, making sure that you've got the proper number of agents.
Excellent. So you've given us a bunch of the benefits. So for folks who have, call centers in place today and have, some sort of analytics that they're doing, manually or whatever, what items within our organization will this enhance or replace or supplement? What would we be looking at?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. The areas it's going to enhance, the most obvious ones are the agent interaction with the citizen and the citizen experience on the other end. So it's really a part of almost a process improvement and continued process improvement where you want to make sure, again, internally we're keeping a certain level of quality. And if we're missing it, we want to take corrective action to train our agents to better handle these sorts of interactions. And then additionally, you don't want to be calling into, if I call into my state, a department here in Minnesota, maybe the HHS, I want to make sure that that call is handled in a relatively short amount of time or a proper amount of time. It really enables you to meet service levels. So a common example service level would be, we want 80% of our calls answered within 20 seconds, right? That's one you kind of just see in the industry. The product will ensure that you're hitting it by scheduling against that to make sure that you have enough people to handle that. And it still works within your constraints, as we call them, the bowling bumpers, right? So I can't have my people working until 7 or 8 o'clock. They have to work within a 9 to 5. Everyone has certain work rules that they have to work around. So it works within those constraints, but allows you to most efficiently be able to handle those volumes. And then from an analytics standpoint, we like to use the term actionable insights. It's usually use case driven when you're looking for it, but really common use cases are first contact resolution. I want to make sure that I'm helping resolve what my citizens are looking for within the first interaction. I want to also maybe reduce hold times, wait times, repeat calls. Those are all kind of rolled into a very similar use case there. And then another one would be any sort of positive or negative sentiment around programs we've rolled out, individual products or services that we're offering. And then again, in state technology, there's so many different unique use cases to what citizens are looking for from different departments that it really does I hate to say it varies, but it does vary depending on who, the end customer is and what they're trying to provide to the citizens.
Okay, and I know that within our organization, it depending on who's calling and what they're calling about, you get a different audience as well that you're dealing with. So folks
Right.
can be very savvy about certain things and about technology, and others just want to talk to a human being and go through.
Exactly.
So this obviously isn't anything new, right? Call centers have been around for a while. Folks have been handling this type of process for a while. What are some of the major changes in the technology that have occurred recently?
So the most common one that pops into mind in really the last, I would say, 3 to 5 years is the push to cloud. You had some organizations that were taking on cloud kind of in the early days in like a hosted partner platform. But we've seen recently the move to full cloud hosting services, be it whether it's Amazon or Microsoft Azure, wherever it's built, moving all these products from being managed by the state in a back room on a racked and stacked server to it's now I'm responsible for the contract, but it's up to the provider to keep that product up and running for me and ensure that they're maintaining the infrastructure. So that's been the first major one, is that move to cloud and shift. And it's really benefited state departments in they're not having to put major capital up front, right? It's the owning versus leasing model that everybody talks about. I don't have to put up a bunch of money, and it's not, to a degree, it's not my problem, right? I get to pick up the phone and call, whoever I have a contract with and say, my system is down, or, ideally it's not, but hey, this is your problem. Mr. Vendor, you need to make sure that I'm able to offer the best service to my end customer. So there's some distinct advantages there in turning it into an operational expense, and again, not having to manage it internally. Other major shifts we've seen in the last couple of years are omni-channel. and even prior to that, multi-channel. So going from something like a single channel, again, using the most common example, inbound calls, to even multi-channel would be inbound and outbound calls, would be inbound, outbound chats. But multi-channel just means we have multiple ways we can speak and work with our citizens. They're often disjointed to a certain degree, and that's where omni-channel comes in. So omni-channel was the next iteration of that, which really housed it under one platform. So there's a number of vendors out there that offer omni-channel communications, but whether that citizen calls in, chats me, opens a ticket, however they're accessing and basically reaching out to me is all housed in a single platform, and I can watch that citizen or customer journey across the number of times they've reached out to us. And that really helps with that first contact resolution, because we, again, want to cut down the number of times they're trying to reach out for the same problem. We really want to try to provide that service up front.
And around that, there must be analytics to show if someone calls in versus chatting versus whatever mode they're using. You must be able to see what's most efficient and most used, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and that's one of the beauties of analytics is analytics in reality is a set of engines, and you kind of tune and turn the engines to whatever your specific use case is. So maybe I want to see what's the most effective method of communication, most timely. Maybe it turns out it is actually chats. You can run analytics on that to see what is the average chat length, how many times does the average citizen reach out over chat versus call. You can obviously compare the two timelines, which is a faster iteration, but it also takes into account, I've done this myself. I've been reaching out to an organization and I'm on hold and I just start chatting with them at the same time. So those are one interaction, but you can see the difference right there in running analytics on which one's going to get that citizen the response they want faster. And that's going to be their preferred method. And maybe internally we want to actually push people to go that method. Maybe chat costs us a little bit less than, minutes on a phone line. So we actually want to try to send people that direction.
And so a little off script here for a few seconds, but with the chatbots and those things, is artificial intelligence and kind of computer learning, is that part of that?
Absolutely, it really is, and I'll there's two answers to that. So chatbots, their use case in call centers is really call deflection. Is to try to reduce the number of minutes we spend person to person, because that is usually in a call center your highest expense is the people. So chatbots meant to divert some of that, and then from there the analytics can help identify what are really common things that people are calling in about, and using that, again, kind of going back to what analytics is for, is using that business intelligence to make a strategic decision. Really, really common use case is password resets. People are calling in to reset passwords for some sort of portal online. That's something where you can use chatbots to discover how many people are calling in for that. And then maybe it's something as simple as a tweak to your web page to make the forgot password button a little bit bigger, a little bit more obvious. And now you can divert, for example, 30% of your traffic because people are able to just reset their password online versus having to call in for it.
Excellent. Cool. So what would be my use cases for going out and looking at a workforce optimization tool?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because it's a platform and there's so many different products within it, there's always a myriad of answers, but really common ones are, again, at the most basic, I need to record every interaction. I want to make sure I have the ability to audit, or there's some legal ramification in place where I need to archive all my recordings. So that would be your most obvious. A step up from there, I'm recording all these calls. I want to actually glean some information from them. I want to make sure that I can score how my agents are handling this. Maybe I just instituted a new quality program, and I have a quality manager who's very high on seeing the scores of every agent and improving their scores and improving overall scores. So that's another place it would come from. We very often see organizations who are doing something like this, but they're maybe doing it in a Word doc or a spreadsheet that they have open, and then they're saving it to a desktop or a joint drive somewhere. The beauty of it is it's taking it off of that, PC and putting it within the tool and tying that score to the recording. So it's all in a unified playback. I can see the screen that the agent's on. I can hear the recording. I can look at the score, or I could be scoring them. That's a great way to just kind of put it in a nice wrapper, and all that's archived for as long as your rules require. So 7 years, 10 years, infinity. Another really common example is workforce management. I would say the biggest competitor to a workforce management solution is Excel spreadsheets. You'll see it everywhere. People keep their schedules within there, and they tweak their agent schedules. Okay, this agent needs to go out tomorrow. Who can I pull over to cover? They're effective, and that's why people do it over spreadsheets, but you are missing certain metrics of data that a workforce management tool can really help with. Things like adherence. Are my people where they're scheduled to be? Conformance. Are they spending the correct amount of time on the phone that they're scheduled to be on the phone? Utilization and occupancy. How effective and efficient are they when they're on the phone? So those sorts of metrics really help kind of give you a full picture of the efficiency of that call center. And again, being able to uplift that off of a spreadsheet and put it into a solution that can intelligently schedule people based on what the expected forecast is, just makes life that much easier for somebody who's administering the system. And then lastly, analytics. Again, this is always a interesting one because there's a million use cases, but any sort of information that you want to try to glean out of your calls or out of your organization is really the best way to do it, is use that analytics to go bird dog it for you. So a common example is most people know anecdotally what their problems are within the organization, and they want to try to make a use case to their higher ups about here's why we need to improve this technology or we need to change our process. Analytics gives you that quantifiable data behind what for so long has been anecdotal to go build out your use case and bring it to your, the decision makers.
Awesome. And kind of the follow up to that, in general, you've given some great responses, but for the state agencies, for government entities, is there any specifics that it can help with?
Yeah, again, the biggest one for state agencies, I think personally, is workforce management and just being able to more efficiently utilize the folks that you have, especially when you're struggling to maybe get additional headcount. Maybe the answer just turns out to be scheduling the agents that you currently have in-house a little bit more efficiently, driving additional information, again, out of the calls and data that you have, whether it's a Department of Revenue or an HHS. Really common example right now actually is in the COVID times, contact tracing is a really, and vaccine tracing on top of that. So that's where analytics is coming in huge. Every vaccine and call center or contact tracing event has a call center on the back end where people are being scheduled to handle those interactions. The analytics stacked in there can tell you where are hotspots, where maybe people are seeing adverse reactions from the vaccines. They're, those sorts of pieces of information, where you want to reach back out to that person and just check in on and make sure everything, is going well. That's where we're seeing a huge uptick in both analytics and workforce management. And then the no-brainer from we want to record those calls because we need to go back and look at them at some point.
Yeah. All right, so I've decided I wanted to put this in place. I want to buy it. What do I have to purchase? Is it hardware, software? What do I need to procure? And what should I be considering before I make those purchases?
Great question. Again, kind of back to my point from earlier, the beauty of WFO these days is it's all cloud-based. So you don't have to really worry about any sort of racking and stacking any hardware. There's no servers you have to put it on. It's as simple right now as executing orders with folks, with the individual WFO providers, and they're able to go then stand up a tenant with all of your information, tie it into your call center technology platform. Again, whether that's still a premise-based platform or a cloud-based platform, like the beauty of these integrations is they're really quick and simple to set up. And then things to consider. I mean, obviously cost, that's the biggest one for a lot of organizations. Total cost of ownership really is the most important. Look at it over a 3-year stretch because it's often, if you're going to go buy a premise system, you're going to depreciate it over 3 years, or you're trying to purchase over a 3-year cycle. Do the same with a cloud solution. make sure that it is going to be cost effective for you over that same time period. Additionally, look at the support and services arms of those organizations, because while workforce optimization is cloud and it's a really snap-in, easy-to-use product, you are going to run into speed bumps along the way. So an organization that has really highly regarded support helps quite a bit, because oftentimes it's more, it's not as complicated as calling in and saying something's broken, I need help fixing it. It may be as simple as, hey, I forgot how to adjust an evaluation form. Can you help me with some just know-how on adding an additional question to this eval form or tweaking it to be more effective? So make sure that the organization has a strong support, services organization. And then on top of that, the implementation. While it is a relatively easy to use product, you want to make sure that you're being implemented by proper engineers in a timely fashion. Everybody has deadlines and project timelines that they want to make sure they're meeting. So that's obviously a critical piece of it, is making sure that it's done in that correct amount of time.
And again, having seen this before, people look to technology to solve their problems. I'm assuming that with this, that as much as the technology can do, that it's also a process and procedure overview that needs to be done. I mean, taking a bad process and moving it to the cloud, or a bad process, moving it and putting in, pretty paper with WFO written on it, doesn't solve all of your problems, right?
No, it's never one without the other. We always recommend, when change management is a huge part of the purchase of a new product, so make sure that your vendor is able to assist you with that, because you need to make sure, as you're changing technology, the way they do it might be slightly different than a vendor you've had in the past. Make sure you're accounting for that. They're accounting for that with you and saying, here's the plan we have for you. My organization, for example, prides on doing a crawl, walk, run approach. So taking it in small chunks and slowly getting you better and better and more efficient in the tools, instead of throwing everything on you, saying, here's the keys, good luck. That obviously just sets it up to not be a successful project, and then you have a frustrated customer, which nobody wants anyway. So again, make sure that you're taking the proper steps and looking at, yes, we're going to become more efficient, but how do we do it incrementally, and how do we add in the process along with the technology to get us to that endpoint?
Awesome. So you had mentioned the pandemic and things going on. A lot of folks are shuffling where people are working and how people are working. So how does this help with our move to working remotely?
Again, the beauty of, if it's a cloud solution, is there's minimal lift. As long as you have internet access, you have access to your cloud-based workforce optimization system. It's usually a .com web address that you're navigating to, putting in your credentials, and you're in the system. The downside to some of the historical premise stuff is you're still VPNing in to get onto a server back at home base. That can always be a little bit of a constraint. But again, as people have gone in the work from home, the organizations that have had the, I would say, luxury of being able to embrace cloud early have seen minimal impact from this, because their platforms have still been able to support it, even with incremental growth for a lot of organizations. Cloud platforms grow and expand with you. So that is one of those beauties where I don't have to go buy an additional server or spin up a new VM or something along those lines. It's just going to grow and then basically shrink back down when I reduce back to maybe my normal amount of workload. So again, organizations that were able to jump on cloud or embrace it early have seen minimal impact. Those that stayed historically premised have seen some impact, but to be honest, as long as you've had the capabilities in place for people to VPN in and have that normal workload, you've been able to somewhat move with the work from home shift.
And when working out of the cloud, I'm assuming that there are security, there are multi-factor authentication and things like that that you can put in place, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a kind of common string right now, or theme, that the cloud is now almost considered safer than premise because there are fewer hands touching it. So, there's things where you're not going to forget a password. I don't know if you saw that thing about the guy who forgot his Bitcoin password and he came down to 8 out of 10 tries, right? You don't run into those sorts of things as often in a cloud solution, because there are already standards in place for encryption and in rest and at transit. There's shared responsibilities, obviously, as in all cloud models, but as a customer, you still own it. Somebody else is just responsible for maintaining the platform, but you also do get the handhold of they have the ability to help you reset things and get it back if you do forget a password.
I don't lose my Bitcoin, don't worry. So what are the with any technology, obviously you have to take everything into consideration. So what are the limitations and restrictions that I need to be aware of when I'm looking at WFO?
This is going to continue to sound very cloud friendly and cloud centric, but when it comes to a cloud workforce optimization, there really is no limit. There's no functional limit. You can grow it as much as you need to, whether it's 50,000 or 500,000 agents and users on the phones. Those cloud platforms are just meant to expand and expand. And even in many instances, they don't need to leverage, hosted servers. It's just, an actual serverless code that's run through it to help it build out and expand, and then can shrink down as small as needed. So it sounds silly to say, but there really are no physical constraints with the cloud beyond internal constraints of things, budget, number of people, hardware like headsets and those sorts of things. Those are kind of your minimal constraints, but the actual software technology itself can grow and expand as much as needed.
Okay, well, you mentioned budget, so that's my next question. How does the cost structure work?
Yeah, and I kind of teased it a little bit earlier with a kind of historical, what I would call premise-based model. You're paying for capital up front, and then it's a perpetual license where you're paying ongoing maintenance. You're entitled to upgrades, and those are done as, typically small over-the-top projects, and then there may be incremental services involved. The flip side with the cloud is while you don't own it, you do have a leasing model where you can pay monthly and you basically get automatic updates rolled into the products. There, again, may be an incremental service charge to get it up and started. But again, there's no moves, shifts, adds that you have to worry about from a services standpoint. And the support is rolled into your monthly fee in that leasing model. So you're able to just continue on with business as usual, open up a ticket because you're paying your monthly fee. That's also why I say look at it over a 3-month period, because typically those cloud models may look a little bit more expensive monthly, but when you average it out against, the people to maintain the services from a premise-based model, as well as those incremental projects every year or two to do an upgrade, they really end up becoming apples and apples, almost the same price. So I would just say, try to avoid sticker shock because they will be different, but just, kind of look at it over that 3-year total cost of ownership view.
Okay. And is it a per agent cost or a per server cost? And are there any additional things like supervisor type costs or that type of thing?
Every organization is a little bit different in the workforce optimization field. It's always going to be a per license cost, but some organizations wrap supervisors in as just an agent license, or this is just a license. You define what sort of restrictions and permissions you want to put on it. Some organizations, especially in like the workforce management world, might go, this is an agent license, this is a supervisor, and this is a scheduler license, as an example. Again, if I just speak personally, my organization, we just have a single license, kind of like I mentioned earlier. You set as many restrictions or permissions onto those licenses as possible. And again, in a cloud model, it's per user per month. And then in a premise-based model, you'll pay up front on a perpetual license. You'll own the license then, and then you just pay the ongoing support for those users.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier call recording. And getting all those recorded, is that usually included in the license cost, or is there an additional fee for storage for that?
In the cloud model, you'll often see additional incremental storage because it's leveraging whoever the hosting provider platform storage is. Now, that storage is significantly cheaper than a historical SAN or NAS would be to keep on premise, to have to keep adding, basically specs to it and building and growing that out. So that is something to make sure when you're looking over a quote or a BOM from someone, make sure that number one, you're looking at the licenses, obviously. Look for things like storage fees, because those are things you want to factor in. And I've had a number of customers at first go, oh, no, we have a ton of SAN and NAS storage. We really want to leverage that. And then we go through the calculation exercise of the number of calls that they take and how long they're retaining them, and it ends up being pennies on the dollar compared to what they were paying for the premise-based storage. So that's just one of those things where you want to make sure to call it out when you're looking at the total cost of a project. And then obviously services, and if the organization has burst fees. So that's also a big one to look out for with cloud, is just make sure you're looking at what is the burst fee compared to the actual agreed upon license fee. And the idea behind a burst is, I agree, for example, we say we're going to purchase 100 licenses. I end up using 115 throughout the year. Now, while I do have the ability to automatically just turn up 15 additional people in the cloud, there typically is an incremental fee because it's services and fees basically that we hadn't been able to predict in the beginning and account for. So just something to be on the lookout for. But there's all sorts of different models too. There's usage-based models. There's burst fees where it actually gets cheaper and tiered as you use more. So just make sure with whatever organization you're working with, work really closely with that account manager and get a full understanding. And ask they may seem like silly questions, but they're very common business cases. So make sure that you're getting in front of them and asking those sorts of questions.
Yeah, better be knowledgeable up front than surprised in the end.
Amen.
So how long would it take? I know you mentioned earlier, crawl, walk, run. If you're like me, it's crawl, walk, fall down, stumble a little bit, crawl a little more. So what is the time frame that we're looking at to implement something like this, through those phases?
Great question. If it makes you feel better, I'm not much of a runner myself. So
if you see me running and there's not a ball around, you should run too. I'm just saying.
Oh, I love that. It really does, to answer your question, it really does depend on what products that we're kind of referring to. Typically, a call recording solution maybe takes about 2 to 4 weeks in a project standpoint. It's usually as simple as snapping into the call center system, creating your retention rules. There's usually a high-level training on here's how you go work within the search and play UI to find recordings, those sorts of things. Quality management's usually around that same timeline because it really is just call recording with some screen captures and scoring tools built in. Workforce management, because it's usually a more involved product, is around 4 to 6 weeks for an implementation. And that's given an average like 300 agent call center. Obviously, a little bit smaller than that's going to be faster. And it really does also depend on how complex the rules are within your organization. So again, if I take a step back and kind of give you a common example, implementing workforce management is really simple. It's just, click to install, next. The lift comes in with creating all your work rules, your work shifts, vacations, time off requests, all that stuff. Building that into the tool is the bulk of what takes that 4 to 6 weeks, and training is a big part of that as well. Because we're basically taking your call center, how it exists on the premise and in real life, and putting it into a virtualized environment so that you can make the day-to-day changes to it. And then analytics is usually 2 to 4 weeks on top of your call recording. So a prereq for most analytics systems is a call recording platform. So factor in about 4 weeks, for that to implement, tune it, and then get trained on it.
Okay. And what information do you need going in? What things should you have ready when you call?
Really basic things: number of agents, if you're talking workforce management, number of queues, things like that. Honestly, what helps me when I'm speaking to an organization is take me through a day in the life of an agent within your organization. And then also maybe somebody from more of an analyst standpoint. What sorts of calls and chats and emails are you receiving day to day? What are you looking to do beyond maybe just the near term record and score? Maybe it's what's your we always jokingly say, what's your nirvana? What's your ideal end state? And and work with your account manager to build you back to here's where you are today, here's where you want to be. Let's figure out how we get you there incrementally. And it is often through these tools, but the answer is usually a lot more complex than, well, we just need a scoring tool or we just need to schedule. It's really, we need to schedule better because we want to hit service levels so that we have happier citizens that don't fear reaching out to us. So it's usually, kind of a multi-step process, but I think always start with that end result that you want to see and work with your account manager to work backwards to how you get there.
Awesome. So we're down to our last question, and this is the easiest one because there's no real constraint to it. What else do we need to know? We've talked about cost. We've talked about equipment and cloud and those things. But what are we missing? What else do we need to know?
The thing I would always say here is, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, look for organizations that really pride themselves on their support and services to make sure that they're assisting you along the way. Find an organization as well in the workforce optimization space that does have a specialty in that state, local, and education, sector, because they'll know your common pain points. They'll be able to point you to other state organizations that have overcome those same challenges, have faced those same challenges. And the biggest thing I would leave you with is, I know what I talked about can sound daunting, sounds like a lot of technology, a lot of process. Find an organization that will hold your hand during that process and really looks to make things simplified and easy for you. So you want maybe a tool that is a really easy to use front end and puts all the heavy lifting on the back end of the tool. Look for that so that there's not a lot of nerd knobs, as we like to jokingly call it, or a clunky interface. Find one that is really easy for your agents to interact with, because you want to make it the most minimal lift for them as possible. Then they'll enjoy using the product. They'll want to dig in, especially supervisors as well. If you make it easier for them to see what's going on in the call center, you're making their job easier and you're empowering them. So look for those easy and smart tools where you don't have to have a data scientist either to run the analytics, where the tool does all that work for you. So that would be my biggest thing to look for in a workforce optimization solution.
Excellent. Well, I told you this would be painless. Hopefully that was.
Indeed.
Thank you again. And again, this is Andrew Malachek from Calabrio. He's the director of SLED sales. If you need any further information about workforce optimization or workforce engagement management, you can reach out to Andrew by going to the member portion of our website, nastd.org, or you can send an email to me, brad.steele@mass.gov, and we will get you in touch with the correct people. Thank you again for watching.